They have 11 million in free space. Okay, cool.
industry for her vicious attacks across the Outland has landed her in the Apex Games. Syndicate's gonna regret letting Maggie off her leash. Now, will she face justice, or will Maggie turn the tables on her would-be executioners? You know what they say? This was a bull and I'll check with you. When there's blood in the water, Maggie will sense it. She's able to track down those she's hurt to finish the job. Velvo saves Shora, by the way. Don't bother trying to run. Maggie moves faster when carrying a shotgun, allowing her to close the distance from any near opponents. What are you told you fail? Emotions? Those who try to hide behind cover will soon discover nowhere is safe. Maggie's rocket drill allows her to bullet out her enemies. Drilling and drilling. But nothing embodies Maggie's love of wanton destruction like her ultimate. Get the hell out of the way. A powerful wrecking ball that beats death and speed boosts in its wake. One day Salvo will be free, and the next day, the syndicate will be deep. Be wary, legends. The most feared villain in the Outlands is at your door. You must band together to control this madness, or she's sure to bring the games down around her. The Apex Games, brought to you by the Syndicate and Silver Pharmaceuticals.
This is AEW Organic Spirit Cream Coffee.
Flavor. Hold on. Tastes good.
Well, guess how much it is right now. This is a cool little thing that I wanted to make a video about, and unfortunately I ended up waiting like 5 days to talk about it, mostly because I wanted to make this video on a day where both of these teams were inactive, so we could get the full capacity of the fan base focused on what we have to talk about. 3 years ago, on January 28, 2019, we saw ourselves a trade made between the Toronto Maple Leafs as well as the LA Kings. And this trade, 3 years down the line, is honestly serving as a pretty big win-win. And as a result, I want to talk about it here in today's video, mostly because, as we said, it is the anniversary, or it was the anniversary, the birth date of this trade. Even though we are a little bit ahead, it's kind of a belated thing at the moment. So, without further ado, let's go back over to 2019 and talk about the Jake Muzzin trade. This is how things went down all the way back then. The Toronto Maple Leafs acquired Jake Muzzin, a defenseman from the LA Kings, who was doing pretty well, and he was seen as more of a prime in-the-now kind of option. Muzzin right now is 32, so back when the trade was made, he was 28. 6'3", 227, he's making $5.625 million till the end of the 2024 season. When he was traded to Toronto back in 2019, he was actually on a $4 million AAV deal, which would have expired the next season, so the Maple Leafs went out there and they signed him to an extension. Muzzin, right now for Toronto, is one of the more capable defenders who honestly, debatably isn't playing his best right now. You could definitely make the argument that he is playing injured, but Jake Muzzin is at his best one of the more all-round, capable, and just well-rounded defenseman on the Maple Leafs. Makes Justin Hall look like a much better defender than he really is when Muzzin is playing at his best. And for the most part, Muzzin has been very solid. 23 points in 53 games played for the Maple Leafs in his first season. 53 games played, 27 points last year, 11 points in 35 games this season. So he's been a pretty consistent guy when it comes to point production, while also having that physical edge and defensive responsibility to his game. The Maple Leafs, in turn, gave up a few things. First off, you have yourselves Carl Grundstrom, a prospect in the system that was playing mostly for the Marlies and he was doing pretty well. You have yourselves also Sean Dursey, a recent draft pick, over a Twitter pickup from the 2018 NHL draft, who was doing pretty well at the time, but who was doing well enough to be considered as a trade piece for this entire transaction. And you also have yourselves the 2019 Toronto Maple Leafs first round pick, then which we will get to soon. Before we go over any of this, though. I just wanted to say how much of a win this was, mostly because the Maple Leafs traded all future. They traded away Grunstrom, they traded away Derby, they traded away the pick in exchange for a Muzzin, who is doing really well, and he is still doing pretty well, too. He has definitely been one of the more integral parts to the Toronto Maple Leafs blue line, and I don't really think that reputation is going to change throughout the course of his 2024 expiring contract. He's still got 2 more seasons after this year. Muzzin, as long as he can still just do what he's able to do, and as long as he's able to play not injured, he'll be a pretty good defender for years to come. And the Maple Leafs got him smack dab in the middle of his prime. He was 29 years old, and now if we go over what the LA Kings have, I mean, it kind of works out in the best way possible. When the 2019 trade was made, the LA Kings were not really in playoff contender mode anymore for a good part of the early 2010s. And guys like Muzzin, guys like Toffoli, they were kind of in that ballpark of not really being all too useful anymore. Sure, they were good players, but the LA Kings just didn't need good players. So what they did in that 2019 period was they traded them all away. Tyler Toffoli got sent to Vancouver for Tyler Madden, Tim Schaller, and a draft pick. You have yourselves this Jake Muzzin trade, which saw Muzzin get sent over to Toronto. We're going to have to make a video about that Tyler Toffoli trade, by the way, 3 years later. Oh boy, that's going to be fun. But either way, the LA Kings acquired themselves a pretty good package here. Carl Grunstrom, for all intents and purposes, is a pretty solid player. He's playing on the Kings right now. He's 24 years old, making $725,000. He's got 9 points in 29 games played, but that is a pretty significant improvement when compared to the 11 points he had in 47 games last year. He was developing a lot in the AHL. He spent a good chunk of time in the Ontario Reign and Toronto Marlies systems, where he was a pretty solidified point producer. But this year, finally, no more distractions, no SHL time, no AHL time. It's just been Grunstrom in the NHL, and to be fair, he's not really the best player out there. Like, there are definitely other players within the LA Kings organization that are younger and are somewhat better in different ways than one. That it makes it difficult to try to project where 24-year-old Carl Grunstrom is really going to take his career going forward. Whether or not he's included in another trade, or whether or not he just sticks around in a bottom 6, middle 6 caliber role, it remains to be seen, but at the very least, there is a serviceable NHL player included in this trade. Then to talk about Sean Durzi, man. You want to go over a guy who's really started to go out there and mold himself into an NHL talent? He's a right-handed defenseman, 6 feet 185, 23 years old. As we noted, an overage draft pick from the 2018 draft by Toronto. Back in 2018 when he was selected, he was a very good producer for the Owen Sound attack on their blue line. Getting sent over to the Guelph Storm helped them out in the playoffs, did a very good amount of damage over there. But then, once the trade was made, there were a lot of Maple Leafs fans that were kind of frustrated that they did give up on Durzi. Sure, getting Muzzin in return has paid.
Ready to reframe the way you investing?
Paid off tremendously, but there was a prospect in Durzi that a lot of people were super excited for, and he showed off why right away in the AHL as an immediate Ontario Reign point-producing machine. This season with the Ontario Reign, though, he was over a point per game as a defenseman. Getting called up to the LA Kings, he's played 29 games, has 13 points, and he's really started to look like a very solid puck-moving option on that blue line. And a guy that definitely is making himself known as one of the more underrated Leafs picks, especially as an overager. So a lot of Leafs fans are going out there saying, yeah, if there was anybody that I kind of hate missing out on in that Muzzin trade, it is Sean Durzi. But at the end of the day, Muzzin and the impact he does have is still pretty important. So there you go. Win-win sort of scenario over here. And then you go over the first round pick that the Maple Leafs gave up as well. This pick ended up being 22nd overall in the 2019 NHL entry draft. And the LA Kings used that pick to select Tobias Bjornfot, a 20-year-old defenseman who suited up in the NHL right away. Now, to be fair, he only played 3 games in his rookie season as an 18-year-old, but he spent the majority of that season in the AHL too. He's been a pretty solid guy as well. He's played 47 games for the Kings this year, 6 points. And you might look at that and say, okay, what the hell, this guy's a bum. Only 6 points in 47 games played. And I'm going to have to stop you right there, because Tobias Bjornfot is mostly known for his two-way defensive abilities. He was never really known for his offensive potential, nor his offensive prowess. And just the fact that he even is 20 years old, playing in the NHL as a solidified defender on this blue line already, is a good sign. Like, Swedish defensemen usually grow up into pretty alright defensemen, especially if they make their debuts and stick around as early as Bjornfot is. And hey, if you want to go out there and say that you want more offense out of this trade return, just look no further than Sean Durzi. The Maple Leafs ended up giving up 2 quality assets that are likely going to be long-term, stable pieces on this LA blue line for years to come. Durzi and Bjornfot, right side and left, could honestly be a pretty good long-term pairing. And you gave up Muzzin for this, plus Grunstrom, whom you could probably get some value as well, either in a trade or just on your team in general. So, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, they ended up getting a defenseman that helped them out tremendously in Jake Muzzin. He's still helping them out today, and even though he might not be at the best of his gameplay right now, there still is a whole bunch more to accomplish with this guy in the next 2 years on his contract. Meanwhile, the LA Kings had themselves a boatload of prospects that became something at the NHL level, and a draft pick that has become something as well, as a 20-year-old too. So there's a whole bunch of potential going into the long term for what the Maple Leafs gave up in this trade, which is why I'm saying it's a win-win. The LA Kings are becoming a lot better now, and it's because of moves like this. It's because of the young guys they have drafted and developed. It's because of the youth flourishing throughout this lineup, complementing the guys like Edler and Quink and Kopitar, some older players on this team, very well. Not to mention the fact that Doughty is still doing Doughty things, he's doing very well, and it's almost like the entire hole left by Toffoli and Muzzin and all those guys, it's sort of been replaced by a lot of these other younger guys who have come into the Kings system and actually shown off very well. Victor Arvidsson is doing extraordinarily well. Apollo has kind of formed into his own. Philip Deneau is over here. Adrian Kempe, Trevor Moore. There's some very good performances on here, and you gotta go out there and say, yeah, like, the timeline was a little bit different 3 years ago. You were kind of in a mini sort of rebuild, retool on the fly kind of mode, and you capitalized tenfold. So, Kings fans, talk in the comments what do you think about the Muzzin trade and what are your opinions on what you have received in that deal. Leafs fans, tell me in the comments as well, how do you perceive losing out on Durzi, Grunstrom, and Bjornfot? I think this is a win-win trade. Let me know in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Trolls 99.
Batman can fight crime, but only you can bring home the Batman Kills Ultra Little Caesars with pizza and household drugs. So you tell us, who's the real hero? Walk in and walk out with the Batman Kills Ultra. And see the Batman in Jesus much more. Delivery.
What I believe in can't be contained. I believe with the right tools, you can turn what we love into what we do. We all of who we are. What's going on, guys? Maybe my first 2022 NHL mock draft. That was, of course, actually going to be draft lottery. Right now, Montreal has you guys obviously with 12 picks there. Not even 10 of them here. That's Arizona, like I said, Seattle, there's Toronto, Columbus there, having a couple chances. The Blackhawks there, what do you think the Blackhawks there? Here we are, protected. Islanders there, love number 2. That's a big drop in the spot. Everyone else there is dropping down by 1. Alright, guys, so with the first overall pick, no surprise here. Montreal gets the right draft pick, right? That is the first overall pick. Has been for the past couple of years now. Obviously, every second draft gets a new goal. I see there. So, first overall pick, the next one enters 93. Personally, no team is stop up, so every county gets a 6 point game. Whatever the case is now, the next season gets counted is over, and they kind of pretty well in the changes. They're going to just bring things as well as dollars, but I think, Gag's way is the software season. He's better this year, and a lot of the colors came out here. So, still, best player in the draft, pick there, 500 finally get their franchise number 1 center. Now, number 2 pick here, guys, unfortunately, I'm going to run into. I have a big move. Now, I would say 6 months ago, he was like a top 10 pick. He's looking for a couple of ranks. I guess this year, everyone seems to have him. Most people have him to strong play for the based on critical. I feel like that's the other 3 points on or that was a 3 point center. So, a second line center. Just a decade into games there. Right now, playing half of the double program 2015. I'm hanging up there. Very, very good. Great player. Does it all for you. Fine, you get smaller for a second, but something but still probably better after. I am fine. So, number 2 player there, no movement. Kind of fine to do on that. Last year, so coming out of there, like I said, love you this day. Very satisfied with it. Now, the figure guys, if you're going to carry you, obviously, what you're doing, looking for a fight, try to help build that in the ground. I haven't taken half of the boys. He's been expecting top of the ground the last couple of years. Very good player when he got the NHL, so you're happy to see him. But I mean, pretty much all of the teams more like those. I've been a good player, thankful. Right now, he's a great team with her. 55 points, 38 games. I don't want it excellent. It's a pretty solid number. He's a smaller person at 5'9", again. Other captains come here up and play it, so it's really solid. You know, it's not one to do it and like, work it out. Saying actually what he's doing. He's still strong for it, I think. He's really good undersized there. Very, very skilled playmaker. I think everyone very active with it. He has good structure. Now that is first line for the next decade. Now, for the fourth day here, guys, our scout drafting day continues superstar. You'll see some now best here in the round class. Definitely a real rock that round right there where like 10, but pretty much everyone has the top 5. And with the skills that want to jump in the center, or the player, and one of the round class. That's good right wing, good off the left side. Like a very great athlete. Also, great enough way to go back to the ground. I feel and after the 5 thing, at the deadline, the 5 up front, your actual cost, you are not very players in this draft time, and I think by the most process of power forward, I guess he has 4.5 pounds, and one that's very good. Let me ask you that. So, overall, I think it's 5. Yeah, I thought they got smaller and all-star centers. With all the that power one acre, right now the got 4 points. 31 down in quite a bit. They wanted to play the boss. I didn't get everything to double C. I didn't get everything to double C. I thought it was that was the now, the big thing is about the David, sort of Arizona, too much more. We do a lot better than the second 15. I haven't taken the draft land right now. The one I take is Buffalo, one second field, number 2 overall, 9 Rangers. Literally, the last 2 years, we'll still have to start this season. If I do honestly say, I think people rank the book like 12 in this draft, but usually the guys that are ranked the high don't drop, much more than anything that day. So something like a bit of a risky pick, but after this spot, I think it's really good value. Lambert Jensen has one of the highest rankings in the draft class. He's looking at like the leader. He's right there. He's all over the place. Like, very fly. I don't know, that's very low. I can see that in Rock. Red, and off the play. Now, there were 7 pages that the Philippines wide taking the first defenseman off the board, Simon Bennett, their high-ranking active prospect, like the sun. Very solid all that defense. Definitely the local people, and every time you're in a players. And I think they're going to go after a future number one center. And I think they're going to go after a future number one center in Connor Ottawa's been looking for a number one center for a while now. I feel like Greg Baston and Josh Norris, both solid players. Baston knows he's playing well with Williams. Norris is probably more like a high-end 2C. Connor kind of like that prototypical power forward out of Lincoln. Like our line Jets, maybe 6'4", 205, but pretty well players, pretty well like that. Jim Nash, boy, this year's got 43 games last week on the opposite Doctor. So again, I think Ottawa is desperate to use that one use that power forward, that leadership one I think Connor can a lot of that for Ottawa. And I'll get running out of 1-5-2. They're on the ground, taking the field. I guess a back-to-back pick at 9 and 10. He's a nice overall pick, Adam, taking like your off here. Very solid Russian forward. He has 6'1", I think, so decent size. This guy ranks anywhere between like 5 and 15, but most people doesn't have him in the top 10. So he's literally like out of the state. I mean, acting as a skill swing and shooting. So he's like the top 10 and just that thing. So he's got solid kind of all-around winger. And there's other definitely when we'll take another Russian forward here. After taking probably a couple of weeks ago. Look at his stats. He's 2 points per game so far this year, but usually young Russian players fairly get played. He's probably just a game 5 nights a night. NHL like the lower Russian league, that's 7 games solid. So this is the one in 21 games Chelsea and the fact he's a Russian player. I think he's going to go get goals and come about right here, like 5 and 6. I think that is like that kind of especially going on this field. So don't get their drafting Russians. Number 10 year guys, so it's next pick.